All right, hello, and welcome back to Go Big Orange Friday. Is it back? Is Ryan Schumpert and Ethan Stone in the same place? Do I not have to just call Ryan Callahan, Austin Price, Brent Hubbs week over week, just, the legend in this industry? I have to just go with the old heads where I'm just the youngest person on every call here. No, it's time to go back to my roots where I feel extremely old and I feel extremely ancient when I'm talking to either of them in any sort of fashion. Ryan Schumpert, Rocky Top Insider. Good afternoon, sir. How are you?
Doing well. Coming to you live from the Starbucks here in Fountain City. So Hopefully the Wi-Fi holds up. Hopefully nothing too crazy happens. But busy times with Tennessee going to Super Regional.
There you go. And we'll talk about that, where Ryan gets the pleasure of doing a 14-hour round trip over the weekend to one of America's staples, Hattiesburg, Mississippi. But Ryan, and then you're in Fountain City here. We could just go ahead because you won't be here after this is up. People aren't going to have to come in. This isn't a live show, so you'll be long gone. But there, I said something to my wife. I don't know if you heard on the broadcast, but Tom Hart said something about Litton's because I think he mentioned when they were talking about Cal Stark who went to Farragut. And somehow they were like, I wonder if you went to Litton's a lot. So Litton's made a comment, and I was like, this man, that's like a 45-minute drive from Farragut to Litton's. Like he wants to mention Litton's, and I appreciate Tom Hart doing the local things, but it was such a stretch where I was like, only Knoxville folks are going to get how insane of a reference this is, where it's like Cal Stark is not making that drive growing up. Who's doing the Farragut drive to Litton's? That's a long way.
That's a very long way. And no, I did hear that he made a Litton's reference. As he usually, when he does, I get a text message about it, but I didn't know it was in context to Cal Stark, which,
yeah.
I mean, Tom Hart, which obviously makes sense because he makes a Litton's reference all the time. He lived in Knoxville. So he knows.
Yeah.
He knows that trek is not very doable. So he had to be just big time looking for the content to talk about.
I know I didn't want to put him on blast, but I thought about it, and I thought about clipping it and just being like, that is, I'm just going to go ahead and say Cal Stark was not riding to Litton's in Fountain City on a Thursday night.
No.
I have my doubts. Also here, Saturday Down South, South Carolina's own Ethan Stone in enemy territory in more ways than one, whether it's Beamer ball, whether it's Dabo ball. The man is gone. He is in another state entirely. Ethan, how are you?
Yeah, I really am in enemy territory here. There's so much Clemson Tigers stuff, whereas my entire life I've had Vols stuff around. You'd be surprised how many Vols fans are here, though. I've run into a couple of them already.
Okay.
You got to give them the old go Vols when you see them, of course. But there's some pretty decent. I mean, we're only about 3 hours away from Knoxville. But yeah, getting moved in here. My cat is going to make an appearance. Here he comes. He's
there you go. What's his name again?
Oliver. Good guy. But yeah, I just getting moved in, getting all situated. We're finally getting pretty close to ready here. We got most of I'd say 80% of the house done. So,
there you go.
So we're getting there.
They don't call him Tool Man Ethan Stone for nothing.
Exactly.
It's funny you said the go balls to strangers because I'll probably never do it again because I did it to somebody when we were in Asheville a couple months ago. We were doing a pretty good hike up Black Mountain. And there was a older gentleman in a Tennessee polo at the gift shop where we were at. And I was like, hey, I did a go Vols. And he looked at me and didn't say a word and just kept moving. And I was like, all right, F me then. My bad. Thought we were going to do a whole human connection thing there. But all right. Like I was wearing a Tennessee workout shirt and he was in it. I was like, all right, cool. It was one of the coldest. I looked at my wife and I was like, that was unbearable. We have to leave now. I got to get out of here. This is terrible. It's not working for me anymore. We got to run because that was the last time I'll ever do it. So that's what you get when you let your heart win, and that's also lyrics to another song. Ryan, you texted me or you put in the group chat that I have some all-time hater energy over the last week. I was on a heater.
You were
fired up. I've been fired up all week, whether it's Tennessee having to go to Hattiesburg, whether it's Cam Fountain ending up at USC, whether it's Sammy Brown ending up at Clemson, Bryant Wesco landing in Clemson. Boo Carter maybe landing in Michigan sooner rather than later. Brian, talk me off the ledge. Is the sky not falling? Is it not been Dan Mullen all along here in Knoxville, Tennessee? Did I go to bat for Josh Heupel on the recruiting trail too much? And now we're on the verge of multiple number 12 recruiting classes over and over again, where Butch is out here getting top 5 classes early on in his tenure at least. Is that where we're at, where I'm just going to have to be okay with 12 and being in the lead for the Francis Mauigoas of the world, the Boo Carters of the world, the JJ Harrells of the world, every single year until it just falls back down to reality and they're at number 12 once again? And it's like, why are we doing this? Why am I doing this to myself? Why am I thinking about a world where Williams, Nwaneri, Cam Fountain, Cam Franklin, Boo Carter, JJ Harrell, Mike Matthews are all going to join up with Nico Iamaleava to join a super team? Why am I doing that to myself, Ryan Schumpert? Why?
Okay, so you said one thing that was right, that you did jump the gun on the Josh Heupel recruiting stuff. You're just a prototypical, going back from my days covering baseball at VolQuest, you're just a prototypical general quarters poster. I mean, you were so up and down with the recruiting stuff. We're going to get all of them or we're not going to get any of them.
Yes.
And the truth is always somewhere in the middle. And this is, you talk about hater energy. This is big time hater energy for me because I didn't even watch the video. But you and Matt on your podcast this week, and you tweeted out the clip. It was some extent, will Georgia's linebacker room be fine without Sammy Brown? And I'm like, and this might have been what y'all said. So again, I didn't listen to it. This is pretty uninformed. Yeah, Georgia. I mean, what are we talking about here? Yeah, Georgia's linebackers room is going to be fine without Sammy Brown. From the Tennessee side of things, Tennessee was never getting Sammy Brown. Him going to Clemson is a huge win for Tennessee. He's not in Georgia. But yeah, I mean, you're right. It's been a tough week for Tennessee football recruiting. But that's the deal. I mean, this is June and July is January and February of old days. There's going to be a million twists and turns. It's incredible to me that you're already punting on Boo Carter before his official visit. Again, this is you riding the wave.
I'm out. He's gone. He's playing wide receiver at Michigan. He's been talked into it. He's not going to play DB at Tennessee. Sky's falling. I'm out.
Yeah, so, I mean, I don't want to say that it hasn't been a bad week for Tennessee in the recruiting trail because it has been. But there's going to be, I think, a lot of twists and turns in the next month and a half. I think Mike Matthews not committing to Clemson this week is a huge win. I think Tennessee is still, my non-expert opinion, the favorite to land him. So, to me, Fountain was the one that was really tough. To me, a lot tougher than Harrell, just because defensive line is a premium position, and it felt like Tennessee was in the catbird seat there. But I think Tennessee's going to be fine. I mean, you look at those two spots, it's been bad this week, receiver and defensive line. I think they're in on a lot of top guys, and you want to doubt Rodney Gardner, go ahead. I'm not going to do it. He's been pulling top guys for 35 years in the Southeast. I think he'll get a couple more in this class.
Okay, I feel better. Ethan Stone, where are you at? Are you in the middle? You're the even-keeled member of this media conglomerate here on the Chase Thomas podcast. Ethan, has it been as bad? Are you okay? Is the Saturday Down South group chat pretty mean in terms of what's happening to Tennessee? Are they enjoying what's going on here? Specifically, Connor O'Gara, Chris Marlar, like who I'm sure Marlar has loved this entire week.
This is going to play 100% to what Ryan said. They're not saying anything at all, which is a good thing for Tennessee. I mean, if Tennessee was now like JJ Harrell flipping, it's not great, but there's a reason for it. It's probably because Mike Matthews might be coming. It's probably because, I don't know about right. I haven't followed the Tennessee football recruiting as closely as I used to in the past, but I know for certain that Mike Matthews has been, kind of predicted to go to Tennessee. Ryan Wingo's in the I guess discussions for it. Amari Jefferson from Chattanooga also considering Tennessee, just dropped to top 6 just a little bit ago. So there's still a lot of stuff to go. There's a lot of time, I guess. So I wouldn't hit the panic button right now because of one bad week. And I would agree with Ryan, and I'd agree with you when you guys say that it was not a great week for Tennessee. But that doesn't mean that it's going to, the sky's going to be falling. Every top 5, 6, 7, 10 you see, I mean, 50% of them that I'm writing about at SDS have Tennessee on them. I mean, everyone's at the very least considering, and you've got a huge recruiting weekend, I believe on June 23rd coming up with a lot of guys coming too. So I wouldn't quite, just because of one bad week, maybe a bad couple weeks, write off Tennessee completely, because guys flipping here and there, or guys picking somewhere else that Tennessee wasn't really even a top prospect for him anyway. So, I mean, here in a month, if we're not getting Mike Matthews, those twists and turns, like Ryan's saying, if we're not getting the guys that we're supposed to be getting, that's when I'd start panicking.
Williams, Nwaneri, Mike Matthews, I need you to get me back off the ledge.
You could name a baseball team of guys that could still commit to Tennessee in the coming weeks.
That's true. Well, guess what? Even the guys here are deflecting. We have Stanwich out of here. Like, I made the mistake of looking at his Instagram bio and his Instagram page. The dude looks like he was recreated out of a Jordan Beck laboratory. Like him to like,
he is a Jordan Beck clone.
Right? Made me sad. And I'm just like, all right, let me back. Okay, 2024, they're number 1 recruiting there. All right, I'll talk myself off that ledge. They're probably winning the College World Series anyway. So it's okay. You can't win literally every year. You can't. There's not enough spots. Everyone can't play here with Tony Vitello's bunch. And look, Ryan, like to be completely realistic here, who do they actually have to land of the remaining big targets to keep Tennessee fans the overwhelming Tennessee fan base happy with where this class might end up? Who are the big ones that they have to at least land a couple of?
Yeah, I would say, and I think you look at the 2 spots where they've been heavy on a bunch of guys. I think you got to land like 2 of Amari Jefferson, Ryan Wingo, and Mike Matthews, and at least one of Kamarion Franklin and Williams Nwaneri. And I think it has to probably be kind of combining the 2. I think you've got to get one of the 5 stars in that boat. And where I will agree with you, and we've talked about it on this program before, like I don't worry about receiver recruiting. I don't worry about defensive line recruiting. But the offensive line, like that's what I worry about. And to me, there's less top guys that are in on at that position. And it seems like there's a lot of traction to Daniel Calhoun to Georgia this week. Obviously, the Anderson kid out in Texas is visiting Tennessee this week. He's got connections to Oklahoma. Like those are guys Tennessee are in on, but maybe not in the catbird seat. And your backup options there, I think, are a lot worse than what you're going to have at receiver and defensive line. So while you talk about the common fan, what's going to keep them off the ledge, I think it's probably more the defensive line and the receivers that I mentioned. But when I look at it, like I just think they're going to be fine at those 2 spots, and I think they're going to get enough of those guys. I'm more worried and have my eyes more set on the offensive line just because that's an area that they haven't been great recruiting. And as good as Glenn Ellerby has been on an on-field coach, I would say he's probably been the weak spot of the staff on the recruiting trail. And you've said before on this podcast, Darnell Wright's gone. The 5 stars you inherited are gone. You got to start bringing some of those guys in. And they really haven't done that to this point. They brought in some good guys, but they haven't recruited at an elite level. And there's some good prospects they're in on, but not enough elite guys to where those other positions you feel like you're just naturally going to get some, how the numbers work out. So that's kind of the spot that fans probably aren't paying quite as close attention to, but I'm going to have my eye on over the next 6 weeks.
Yeah, you look at like Gage Ginther. Yeah, it's great. He might rise up to 4-star, whatever, by the time the season ends. But it's like that's still a long-term project. Like all these guys you look at and you're like, all right, I mean, maybe. But those guys, generally speaking, I don't think you're going to be able to turn all of these 3-star offensive tackle and inside linemen into premier SEC talents. Like there is still a reason. Like Darnell played better with Ellerby than he did with Pruitt, and he developed better under Glenn Ellerby. But like, still required. He had that 5-star talent out of the gate here that was just there. It was evident, and you're able to work with that. Like Cooper's gone. I think there is actually another Mays brother though, isn't there? Isn't there one more?
I think he's way younger.
Okay.
Like probably in middle school right now.
Oh no. Well, we got a ways to go until the next the Mays brother comes up. Yeah, I mean, I don't know. Like when we talk about this year, like we still feel pretty okay by and large with where the line's going to be. It's not going to be devastating. I think the tackle spots might be potentially bad, but outside of that, next year, I mean, Campbell's gone. I don't think both tackle spots are probably going to be different. At least one right guard spot's different, and then the center's position's different. Like it's going to be a very different offensive line next year, and that's when you're like, okay, well, Ellerby's had 3 years, and they're going to have to dip a bunch in the portal again. Like I just don't see a way where they don't remake their offensive line in the portal, and I wonder if that's what they end up doing because they're not landing those bigger names. Is they're just going to have to swing big in the portal, and utilize NIL in the portal with transfers. Like that's just where their transfer targets line up year over year. It's just they're not getting the high school 4 or 5 stars. They're going to have to get them in the portal and bank on them working out and being a plug and play option in Knoxville. That's where it seems like we're headed on that front. Do you agree?
Yeah, in the immediate future, like talking about next year, I think you're absolutely right, and especially at tackle. I think you look and there's, again, I've said this on here before, to me, and I don't want to undersell it, but to a lot in the recruiting process, guards a lot of time to me are kind of a dime a dozen. Like you can find a lot of good interior offensive linemen, big strong dudes. Jamonte Spraggins to me is the great example of that. Super low time recruits, low rated 3-star, and he's been great for Tennessee. He's got that nasty streak in him, and he's a really good player. And they have some guys like that. Addison Nichols was a little bit of a bigger recruit, but a guy I think is going to be really good. Might even end up starting for him this year at guard.
Yeah.
Definitely in 2 years is going to. So I think they probably have enough in the interior to piece it together. But to your point, like it's hard to look at the young guys they have on this roster and be like, yeah, there's a lot of offensive tackles you feel good about who can step into that. Doesn't mean no one will develop, but it does seem like they're probably going to have to. It's trending towards that direction, like you said, of having to pick up some guys out of the portal.
And then Alec Ablin, I'm curious to see. He's got like he was thrown to the fire with some of these guys. He's going to have to start landing somebody. Like you look at the tight end room going into next year. I mean, it's just Ethan Davis right now is all we're looking at here. So what he has to do on the campaign trail, on the recruiting trail this year, and then the transfer portal over the next year is going to be huge. There is a lot of pressure on Alec Ablin to build depth and get some big fish to replenish this tight end room.
Definitely. And, one thing I would say with him and obviously they lost Riddell to Georgia and LeBlanc, the kid down at Baylor, to Ohio State. And, not to say those weren't tough losses, but I think it's easy to overlook, and this could come back and backfire. He could decommit. Did I say this? But Jonathan Eccles, when Alex Golesh left, all the buzz that I heard was that he was, if he wasn't going to decommit, he was going to go on a bunch of visits, and that was very much an open recruitment. To this point, it seems like he's still relatively steady at Tennessee. Obviously, he's still committed. So that's one that Alec Ablin won't get any credit for because he didn't land them. But if Jonathan Eccles ends up signing with Tennessee, I think Alec Ablin deserves a ton of credit for that. And you're right. They need to find a second or third guy to pair with him. But don't overlook Ablin's importance and if Tennessee holds on to Eccles and how pivotal he was to do that.
There we go. Ethan, is Tennessee a top 5 roster with Josiah Jordan-James back? Do you feel comfortable with that preseason top 5 ranking? The best shooter on the team, by the way.
This is such a tough question because I know Ryan and I disagree on this, but if you look at it from, once again, I look at things from a national perspective more than I do from a Tennessee or a simple roster perspective. If you look at this team from a national perspective and you don't think they're at the very least a top 7, I really looked into it. I think they're top 5, if at the very least top 7. They have everyone in their starting 5 their projected starting 5 is returners and Dalton Knecht, which, it's hard to put too much into transfers, but I think he's going to be a daggum good one. I think Knecht is going to be really good. And Tennessee's roster, just in general, it's returning veterans. It's good newcomers. It's good people from the transfer portal. And by good people from the transfer portal, I mean Ledlum and Knecht, because they're probably the two that are actually going to do something in the court this year. But you've just got so many different avenues for Tennessee to be good that I think you can not safely, you can put them in that conversation and not be ridiculed for it. Jeff Borzello agrees with me. Jeff Borzello has them as a top 5 team right now. And that's going to change because there's going to be people, moving around a little bit. I feel like May 31st was kind of the deadline for a lot of that action. Sorry, my dog is going crazy. But like, for example, when Ryan and I were talking about it, Zach Edey, in that time, Zach Edey has come back at Purdue. So, Purdue, I'm not sure. People are championing Purdue as a top 5 team in the country. I personally don't see it. I just don't. It's just because Zach Edey is coming back. That's why people are going to say Purdue is that good. But, otherwise you got Kansas, Michigan State, and Duke that you can definitely put above Tennessee right now. Marquette, maybe. Kentucky's potential, not them right now because there's too many.
Yeah, I wouldn't put them ahead of Tennessee right now.
Yeah, not right now, but their potential to be maybe. USC's potential to be maybe, but you can't put them ahead of Tennessee right now. Like, you can't say definitively that they're top 5 preseason teams. Tennessee, however, because they have all these veterans, because they have new guys coming in, because they have solid pieces in the transfer portal, their only real question to me is post. But you got Tobe, you got Jonas, you got, I mean, you know, that's the question mark, isn't it? Is whether or not you have enough guys in the post, probably running Josiah at the 4, that could get you to that top 5 level. Me personally, I think calling them preseason top 5 is not a crazy thing at all. Now, if you look more at the roster and you say, is this a top 5 roster? Kind of like Ryan was arguing with me on about a week ago on this. I would tend to agree with Ryan because you got a lot of questions. You got Zakai, who is not healthy yet, not 100%. I expect him to be healthy, but, you know, your starting point guard not healthy going into the season, that's not great. You got a lot of transfers that you have to rely on. You're going to have to rely on at least one of these freshmen between Estrella, Carr. I'm going to count Dillion as a freshman because this is going to be his first season. You got to count on at least one of them to do something of any merit. And that's a lot of things to ask of a basketball team for a top 5 team. I will definitely yield that. But if you look at their overall what they're returning, I definitely think they're a top 5 preseason team.
What about you, Ryan? Have you, after a week of thinking about Ethan just destroying us in the Twitter DMs, was fired up?
I understand. I'm not 100% like, you know, they are definitely like, I wouldn't hate you for not saying it, but
you're fired up, man. You're on the out, like you're ready to go.
I think they're going to be daggum good. I think a lot of people are underestimating them. I think they're going to be really good.
Punch the Final 4 tickets, says Ethan
anyway,
Stone of Saturday Down South. What about you, Ryan? Are you there?
I think I'm not there. I think Ethan did a good job of explaining the difference of how we look at it, where to me, yeah, preseason, like, sure, you just want to look at the roster, what's proven. You know, there probably is a good case that they're top 5. But preseason rankings in college basketball, hardest of any sport. Nobody, besides Aaron Torres, who went to UConn, had UConn in their preseason top 25 last year. Not a soul had Kansas State close to threatening. It's just so hard with how these rosters change year in, year out to project things. So I look at it less of compared to everybody else and more, all right, what does Tennessee have pieces-wise? And if you're asking me, do I think at some point next season will Tennessee be in the top 5? We'll say even after November, so we take out the preseason element of it. I would probably say yes. I mean, they were last year. But when I look at, has this team done enough to address their issues and be they're going to be in top 5 from start to finish of the year, the vast majority of the season? I don't have that as a definitive yes. I don't think it's necessarily a no. I mean, I think Dalton Connect is a really talented guy and could be a star, but it's hard for me to say you're going from playing Northern Colorado. I couldn't even tell you what conference that's in. A bad Northern Colorado team, I'll add. Not a good Northern Colorado team. He's shooting as much as he wants. It's hard for me to say that that's going to be an easy transition, especially with Rick Barnes' kind of history at Tennessee with transfers. And not many of them have panned out. And even more than that, I think that's where the most talk will be. I think Freddie DeLeon is a big X factor just because his ability to score. But you look at it, and this is what I said last week. Santiago Vescovi, I'm a huge fan of. I think he's a great player. Is still the best scorer on Tennessee's team. And you could say Zakai Ziegler is a close second. Besides that, there's not really a close second. And that's Tennessee's issue, is finding consistent scoring game in, game out. And I just don't know that they have definitive answers to that. Dalton Connect could be that. I'm certainly super high on Jemai Mashak. I think he's capable of taking a step forward and probably not being a number 1 guy, but being a better number 2 or 3 than Tennessee had last year. And I think you could say the same thing probably only with Awaka offensively, that he could take a step and be a double-digit scorer. But you don't know. You're projecting guys taking jumps forward, which are certainly possible. And then you're looking at a guy like Connect, or you're looking at a guy like DeLeon, who hasn't proven it at this level. They're definitely really talented scorers. But what happens when you get in the heart of the season? What happens when Rick Barnes is on you about your defense not being good enough? Do you keep that confidence offensively, and are you able to push through and kind of become get into a groove offensively playing with the depth Tennessee's going to have? You know, these guys, it's no guarantee any of them are going to get 20 minutes a game. Can they get into a rhythm and become consistent offensive threats? That's what I don't really know about. I think this team's floor is really, really high, and that's where I'll give Rick Barnes and the staff a ton of credit for what they did this offseason. This is a team that I think will spend the entire year in the top 25. But when you're talking about top 5 team that is one of the best in the country, they could get there. I'm not saying they can't, but to me, there's still a lot of questions to be answered.
I just wonder who it's probably going to change throughout the year. And obviously when Zakai is ready, and then injuries are always just a part of it. But I do wonder who will end up being the best 5. I wonder if there's going to be, like, friend of the pod, Will Warren, and I wonder if there's going to be like a disconnect between, like, clearly this is the best 5 for Tennessee and what Barnes is going to want to do for his best 5. I wonder if there's going to be a disconnect this season, because there is a lot of potential for Barnes going super big here and relying on going super big and trusting that more than the versatility he might have with Zakai, DeLeon, Josiah Jordan-James, Dalton Connect, and Jonas Idu or something like that. Like, I wonder what the best 5 and should be the closing 5 will end up being for Tennessee, and if it will result in some hurt feelings. Because I wonder what Ledlum has been told coming into the process, because I don't see a way he should be on the court in important moments late in games. Like, if there's a point where it's like Adu and Ledlum, I'm going to be upset. I'm going to be annoyed, because if you want to start there, that's fine. Like, you want to start games big and just brutalize people on the boards, like, that's fine. But I just don't see a scenario where those two should be on the floor to close. Maybe Ledlum's the closing 5 and Adu gets his feelings hurt and he's not the closing 5. I don't know. I have my doubts, and I'm pretty high on Adu coming in this year. I'm very curious, because I think he actually could be a pretty solid wide open 3 pick and pop shooter. Like, you see it in practice, and like corner him top of the key 3. I think it can happen if he trusts it. Like, he is someone, Adu has the most upside of any of them to me and what he can do, but we'll see if he ends up being that closing 5. I don't know, Ethan, do you agree with that? And what do you see the best 5 being?
That Adu, the 3, that's interesting. I mean, that's more projecting, like Ryan is talking about. That's more, hoping he can get to that point where, I mean, there was a point where Olivier couldn't shoot either.
Yeah.
I mean, we'll get to Olivier, I'm sure, but there was a point where he couldn't shoot beyond the arc either. He developed that, and he became a legitimate threat at that. It's so difficult to project that kind of stuff, because there's a couple guys that are question marks like that. You got Ledlum, who is, I agree with you, Chase. I don't know what Ledlum's going to do from here out. Especially, I'm assuming he assumed that James was not coming back,
right?
He's the one that gets the short end of the stick to make Josiah coming back. Like, he's the one that's got to be like, this is a very tough break for a guy that had a lot of good options.
Yeah. And I think Ledlum has the potential to be pretty decent. It's a jump from the Ivy League to the SEC, so that's always going to be something you have to take into account. I think he'll be like an 8 maybe on this team, maybe an 8 or a 9 on the team at best now with Josiah coming back. The other question mark for me is Estrella, because you talk about, now I don't think he's going to be a big Grant Williams year 1 or anything like that by any means. I don't think he's going to be dominant by any means right off the bat. I do think, especially depending on how Barnes wants to go about this, like you said, Chase, whether or not he wants to go traditional or whether or not he wants to run Josiah at the 4 and just keep going small, Estrella could be an interesting option to back up Adu, just to see. I mean, if he's good, that's probably something they're going to run. They're going to run a lot of Adu, Estrella, and then, I don't know, maybe Tobe. It's difficult to say that, because there's a million guys on this roster that can do a million different things. So it's kind of hard to project where all of them are going to go. I don't think he's incredibly important. I just think Estrella is someone going to be interested in. If he's really good, I think that is really, really good for Tennessee. If he's not really good, I don't think it's going to hurt him by any means. But, as far as projected lineup, I mean, assuming Zakai is healthy, you get Zakai, Santi, probably Connect, Josiah, and Adu would be my guess for a starting 5 at the start of the season. Now, where are they going to go with that? I have no idea. There's a million different roster combinations that you can move on from there. Another question I have is, will Jordan Gainey see the court literally ever? like literally
I saw him on campus today.
Is he ever going to see the court? That's very interesting to me, because I don't know. I feel like he was an incredibly good shooter. The problem is he's at a smaller conference. He's a little undersized, and he doesn't really fit ahead of anybody. Like, he's not going to play ahead of Vescovi. He's not going to play. I don't think he's going to play ahead of DeLeon, honestly. He's not going to go ahead of Zakai, obviously. So where's he going to fit in as a rotational player? With all the guys in front of him? Is he going to play a Tyreek key role? Is he never going to see the court at all? I'm leaning more towards the latter, that he's just never going to see the court at all. So you have
how many years of eligibility does he have? Does he really need to this year, or will he? I don't know.
He has 2 years of eligibility. He could redshirt possibly too, because he hasn't redshirted yet.
That would probably be the best move, honestly, because I don't see any way for him, especially if we're going to talk Ledlum. I don't see any way for him to see the court personally.
I wonder
that projected 5 though. That would be mine. The Zakai Santi.
I'll say before the year, or before Zakai comes in, because I don't think he's ready. Right, like opening night. I would be surprised if he's in the starting lineup opening night. I would probably guess it's Santi, Freddie, Meshack, Ledlum, Adu. Would you agree with that, Ryan, or do you think it's different?
I would say to start the year, if Zakai is not out there, I think it's Santi, Jamai, either Freddie or Josiah, and then I think they're going to start the year Tobe and Jonas starting. That's
really?
Knowing Rick Barnes, like that, I think he's going to start the year big. Now, if you want to talk about, to me, what's the best case scenario for Tennessee's lineup? Like, things pan out. What's Tennessee's starting lineup? To me, it's Zakai, it's Santi, it's Jamai, it's Connect, and it's Adu. And then you got Freddie coming off the benches, that scorer that can kind of spark some things. But what I would say with all of this, and maybe this won't be starting, but you talk about closing time, I think this goes back to what my concern and why I can't say this is a top 5 team yet, is I just think until you see consistency with a lot of these guys, when they have Barnes is going to have 9 or 10 guys to play, and we know how he likes to use the bench as a motivator. Like, I just think you're going to see the closing time lineup from December through February change a lot. And you're just not going to have, you don't have consistency from Meshack, or you don't have consistency from any of the transfers or the big men. Like, those guys don't take jumps forward. Like, I just think you're going to see Barnes lean on the depth and lean on his ability to use the bench as a motivator and use defense as or being able to use the benches like to hold guys hostage to playing really hard defense. And until I see Rick Barnes prioritize offense at any point over defense, that's just going to be my mindset of what I think he's going to do.
I hadn't really thought about that before. That's a good. I mean, it's very similar to what he did this past season. Really, I mean, having too many guys can definitely be a negative. I mean, because you're not allowing guys to get into a groove moving into the more important parts of the season. I think
someone's going to get buried. Maybe 2 to 3 people are going to get buried.
That's a really good point.
100%.
But it's a good problem to have. Like, iron sharpens iron. Like, it's good to have this kind of depth where you're not just having, you're like, we're out of guys. Like, we don't really have another option here. Like, there's going to be some good players who are buried on the bench when Tennessee gets rolling, and I'm just very curious to see who ends up being those guys. Olivier Nkamhoua, though, ends up at Michigan. A lot of folks thought he was going to end up overseas, if anywhere. Kind of surprising. Michigan, I don't think is going to be very good next year. So it's probably, I don't know if that's better for him, that he's going to have more opportunities to do a lot more, kind of replacing that Hunter Dickinson role for the Wolverines. But I don't know, Ethan, do you like the fit for Olivier at Michigan, or do you think this is probably not going to go well in his final year of college basketball?
Michigan was like spot number 1 for him, if not overseas, at the very beginning of his recruitment. And then they kind of died off, and it was Baylor and West Virginia. And then Michigan out of nowhere, like a week ago. I guess he had an official visit there or something. Michigan came out of nowhere and was back in contention, and then he was committed like the next day. So I think that has something more over to do with starting and playing time, because I don't think at West Virginia and Baylor he was going to – I mean, he was probably going to come off the bench / be the 5th guy that started on the floor. And you're going to have a Michigan post Hunter Dickinson, and you're going to have – I don't know everything about their roster, but I know they lost a lot, and I know they're probably not going to be fantastic. You can't quote me on that because I just don't really know what they have around him. I haven't looked that much into Michigan lately. But, I mean, it's if he can't get his original goal of going and, I don't know, playing overseas or playing just a professional career in general, it's not a bad place for him because, I mean, he's run out of time in college. You want to start. You don't want to go back and do the same thing you would have done at Tennessee or take a step back from what you would have done at Tennessee. I mean, he was starting this past season, so you don't want to go to West Virginia and all of a sudden be, the 6th man at a Big 12 school where the schedule is considerably harder than it is in the SEC. So it's a good place for him. As far as do I know that as far as do I know if it's going to be a perfect fit for him or if he's going to light the world on fire or if he's going to falter out. I really couldn't tell you because I just don't know much about Michigan's roster and what they're doing at the moment.
Ryan, what do you think? What's your gut tell you? Does he ultimately work out at Michigan or no?
My gut tells me he'll be at Michigan a lot like he was at Tennessee. Some really good games, a lot of inconsistencies, never fully put it together. So that's my thought. Again, I don't have the expert opinion on what his fit's like at Michigan. But what I will say about the Olivier Nkamhoua transfer portal process, and I'm taking off, that's why I like coming on the podcast, I'm taking off my Big J hat here. This is not inside information. This is speculation, but past speculation. I think this is pretty well-informed speculation. Maybe not well-informed, but accurate. What he did really well is my understanding, I think Barnes said something like it in the press conference, is that when he entered the portal originally, the plan was to go play overseas, but his dad wanted him to enter the portal. And then he just laid low for about a month. Laid low, went on, I guess, a couple visits, didn't make any decision, and he let everybody in the transfer portal, just about everybody, make their decision. And then he sat back there and waited, and he waited, and he waited, and teams got desperate. And I think he got a bag because of it. To be frank with you, I think he significantly increased. Again, that's all speculation. I think he significantly increased his NIL opportunities by waiting for teams to get a little desperate, or teams that needed pieces and were willing to spend a little over what his production probably will be. And I think you saw the perfect example of this was, I guess, I don't know, all the days are running together with baseball, but earlier this week, after his Michigan visit, all the On3 people and Trilly Donovan and Andrew Slater, all of the Twitter experts on college basketball recruiting, Olivier Nkamhoua is down to 2 schools, West Virginia and Baylor. A day later, Michigan's back in the hunt. A day later, he commits to Michigan. I'm no genius. I'm not a world-renowned educated person, but those feel like pretty easy dots to connect, and a pretty darn good job by Olivier Nkamhoua and his family of playing the game and maximizing his potential.
I wish him nothing but the best, but I love that theory that he got the bag, and that it actually worked out because the general consensus is like you want to get in the boat, you want to make a commitment early before time runs out and spots are filled and everything else. But actually waiting for a Caleb Love to not come through Michigan and just kind of buying your time and seeing which big program, big blue blood gets desperate enough, and you just kind of slide right in. So that if that is indeed what happened, good for him.
And it's hard to get big men in the portal. Like, there aren't that many of them. And Olivier was always good enough of a player that even if it didn't work out and people filled the roster and he wasn't going to be able to get a bag somewhere, like, he was never going to get left off of having a Power 5 option. And that's on top of the fact that he could have gone and played overseas. So, it'll be interesting to see how it plays out.
There you go. We'll wrap up with the Tennessee Vols baseball team. Ryan, you're pretty plugged in here. When you saw that Tennessee was not hosting over the weekend in the Super Regionals against the Southern Miss Golden Eagles, what was your immediate thought, and what can you speak to when it comes to why Tennessee is not hosting?
Yeah, so I mean, when the announcement came out Tuesday, I wasn't surprised. Just from talking to some people around the program on Monday, there was not, no one said there's no chance, but there was not a lot of optimism that they were going to host. They thought they were going to have to go on the road. So that's kind of how I thought about it. I was obviously very depressed. Southern Mississippi in the middle of June, 7 hours. I mean, it's an act of terrorism from the NCAA to do it to me. So as to why, I think there's really 2 things you can point to here. I think the first one, and they list their main parameters being like being able to host, having a stadium and hotel rooms, and both teams could do that. About 1,000 more seats at Pete Taylor Field. I think they wanted the money of being able to sell 2,000, 3,000 more tickets over the course of 3 days. And I do think there was a little bit of politics that went into it as well, where there's some connections on the selection committee to the Southern Miss program. And I'm going blank on their coach's name right now, but obviously he's in his last season. I don't necessarily think Tony Vitello is the most well-liked guy across the college baseball spectrum. Real hot take from me there. But I think those sort of things that kind of went into it, because when you look at resume, certainly there wasn't some massive divide between the 2 teams, but anything you look at, Tennessee had the better resume. I mean, every category besides wins, when Southern Miss had, I think, 4 or 5 more wins playing in the Sun Belt. So RPI, which has been the king for every decision they've made, shrink the schedule, more impressive regional win, more quality wins. Tennessee's got all of it. So I think it went to the money for being able to sell more tickets, and then maybe a little bit of politics mixed in there as well.
Yeah, I don't like it, but I wonder, do you think it's something that Tennessee, it's going to end up being a positive, Ethan, that they have to go on the road, that they can play kind of ticked off because of what just happened, and they thought they were going to be able to host, and they look at it as they are the better team by just about every metric, that they are a better baseball team than Southern Miss at this point in time. Like, can you spin it for a positive that it's actually good that Tennessee will not take Southern Miss lightly because they have to travel and they're going to just play ticked off all weekend?
It can be spun as a positive. It's definitely not a positive. I mean, especially, you'll want, I get what you're saying. It can definitely be spun as a positive. But, I mean, if you want to play the black jerseys thing, and if you look good, you feel good thing. If you want to play the Tony can say you guys were disrespected and all that, even though Ryan's 100% correct that it's just because of money. And that's how the world's been. It's what keeps things going is money. Every single decision is going to be made by money. And I feel like Tennessee versus Southern Miss. Anyone in their right mind, if they weren't even talking about baseball, would pick Tennessee in that aspect. You can definitely spin it into a positive, though. I mean, Tennessee has played better on the road as of extremely late. They did not play well during the season on the road, but they went and they beat South Carolina on the road to end the season. They just outlasted a really tough regional in Clemson, which is obviously on the road. And, there's nothing showing that they're going to revert back to midseason Vols and just all of a sudden be terrible. But then again, that's what you said last year against Notre Dame. Not necessarily the road Vols, but just that they'll overlook them, I guess, is also a possibility, that Southern Miss is the team that's not as difficult as Clemson. And for Tennessee to revert back to their midseason form would be very Tennessee. But I don't necessarily think it's a good or bad thing. I think there's ways that Tony Vitello can amp up his team to still be able to beat what is, by all metrics, as we've already discussed, an inferior team as of right now, as of how they're playing right now. Especially Tennessee has played really good baseball. They just knocked off a team that won, I think, 17 in a row in Clemson. And, I mean, they were going to do it again, very likely, if Charlotte hadn't beaten them, because they're tired. And so Tennessee's playing great baseball right now. Southern Miss is also playing great baseball right now, but I don't necessarily think it being in Hattiesburg is going to be the impending doom for Tennessee, I guess, if that's your question.
3:00 on Friday. I'm just going to be, I guess it'd be 2:00 local time. I'm going to be smashing 2 vitamin waters together, Stone Cold style, and just getting ready to go for this, because I want to just throttle. I was so annoyed, and I told my wife, I'm like sweating how annoyed that I'm not going to be able to go to a super regional at home this weekend. Like, I am so annoyed that I need it to be embarrassing. I want it to be full on Jordan Beck flicking off the outfield as he's rounding the bases. I want this to be the old time FU to the NCAA. And unfortunately, Southern Miss is going to have to take the beating here for hosting in this regard. Ryan, because I'm not a capital J journalist when it comes to Tennessee, I can do this. You can't, but in spirit, I hope that you feel the same for having to make this 14-hour round trip over the weekend, because I just hope it's a bloodbath. I really do. I hope they just absolutely throttle Southern Miss in 2 games.
Well, the thought of it being 2 games and only having to spend one night in Hattiesburg is an unbelievable win. And that's honestly my prediction. Like, it's baseball, so I wouldn't be shocked if things go otherwise, but Tennessee is just playing really well right now, and everything they struggled with all this season, regular season, they did so well when it comes to regional. I mean, the defense was fantastic. There were games where they did not hit well early, and they stuck with it, and they were able to grind out some runs and stay in the game against Clemson. And then in the Charlotte game 3, they didn't come out firing, but they stuck with it. And then the crazy one, Tony Vitello pitching decisions, has not gone Tennessee's way this season. And by goodness, with Chase Burns, I thought he made 6 different mistakes. He joked afterwards at his own dad. So the first thing he said to him was, "Boy, would I have managed that game differently." But the decisions worked out. So all those things that Tennessee struggled with seem to have gone well for them. And Southern Miss is certainly a good team. I don't want to say they're not, but I think Tennessee's more talented. I think the depth and number of arms Tennessee's going to be able to throw at Southern Miss is going to be unlike anything they've seen all season. And you look at Tanner Hall, who's really the star of that Southern Miss team on the mound. threw 151 pitches last weekend. I'm sure he'll be good. I'm sure he'll be able to throw, a good outing, but that's a lot to turn around and be really effective in that type of workload in the weekend and then go do it again the second weekend. Kevin Kopps is the only guy I've ever seen do it. So maybe Tanner Hull has got that Kevin Kopps in him. But
against an SEC program of all things, too. I mean, they've only played a couple Power 5 programs. Am I wrong?
Yeah, no, that's correct. They have dropped 2 out of 3 to Illinois in the regular season. They lost midweeks to Alabama and the Mississippi schools, and obviously they beat Auburn last week in that regional. So they haven't been fantastic there. I don't, buy too much into that just because those midweek games are kind of wonky with who you're pitching. But yeah, they haven't had a ton of experience there. And then the last thing I'd say, they use about 7 arms pretty heavily. Only 2 of those guys lefties, and they're kind of down the list. So obviously Tennessee got the kitchen sink of lefties thrown at them last week at Clemson. They'll get a little bit easier task against right-handed pitching this weekend.
There you go. Ethan Stone, what can the good folks check out from you and the team over at Saturday Down South this week?
Yeah, as the Supers kick off, we'll have full coverage of all the Big Four, ACC, Pac-12, Big Ten, and SEC. Those are the sites that we cover. So any of those teams in the Supers, we'll be covering them. Also covering the Women's College World Series, Florida State and Oklahoma. Florida State has no chance. Oklahoma is generational, absolute juggernaut. Wish Tennessee could have gotten there. That would have been fun, but we've been covering that all weekend, and we'll continue to moving into the future.
There you go. Ryan Schumpert, what about you and the team over at Rocky Top Insider this week?
Yeah, so Jack Foster and I will be down in Hattiesburg, so we'll have tons of coverage from that. I have a feature story coming out on Friday about Camden Sewell and, some of the adversity he's gone through this year and just what he's meant to Tennessee's program. So plenty of stuff on that. Full steam baseball. Rick will be back in Knoxville holding down the fort for any football or basketball news that comes up. So as always, everything covered. And yeah, Ethan kind of let it in there, but shout out to Lady Vols, the softball. Fantastic season. Heck of a run. And like I said, wish it could have lasted a little bit longer, but as good as Oklahoma is, I think it would have been pretty unlikely it ended holding the trophy.
No one's beaten the Sooners, so third place is nothing to hang your head on.
No, not at all.
You might say nobody's beaten Oklahoma soon. Ryan Schumpert, Ethan Stone, thank you as always, and I'll talk to y'all very soon.
Well done, nephew. Chase Thomas Podcast. Hell yeah.